for our kitchen conversations and learn a thing or two. And I don't burn nothing in my kitchen.
This is Barbara Berrigan-Perea with Delta Flows, a radio show by the Voice of Stockton and Restore the Delta. This is the weekly radio show where we discuss everything Delta related: the environment, water management, water quality, farming, history and culture, public events, recreation, Delta food, and the arts. Tune into Delta Flows on KXVS, the Voice of Stockton, streaming live on Facebook and YouTube at KXVS Radio.
KXVS, the Voice of Stockton, live. The Voice of Stockton at Stone Soup Studio. KXVS.org.
The views and opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of KXVS, the Voice of Stockton, or its parents, affiliates, management, and staff.
Hi, this is Joy Neas with Behind the Art Scene on KXVS, the Voice of Stockton. And today my guest is Elena Mangahas. She's a leader in our community. She's very active in the Filipino American National Historical Society's museum and their other projects. She is on the board of the Little Manila Foundation and Sister Cities. Welcome, Elena.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you for the invitation to be here.
Oh, good. So,
I like small gigs.
and you've made a lot of notes for our talk today. So how did you come to Stockton and get involved in all these different groups?
You mean, when did I immigrate to Stockton?
Uh-huh.
Well, I came here over 30 years ago. This is pretty much my second stop, but my first stop was brief. So literally, I immigrated to Stockton from the Philippines in the early 80s. And I have chosen it because I heard about the place where there's plenty of Filipinos. Somehow there's an attraction to that. And this is where I raised my children. My family was thriving in the early years, and we decided to stay as long as we can. And my return to investment in this town is I have my youngest daughter as a teacher in the public school system. So I guess I paid my dues to my town.
Oh, yes. And Martha, she's an art teacher?
Yes, she's an art teacher, a very, very dedicated art teacher. Before that, she was an English teacher, and she responded to her calling. So she's loving it where she's at right now. This is at the Chavez High School.
And she also works with Jagged Lines of the Imagination?
Yes, she does. She does classes at the Teen Center and at the, what do you call this, right across the street.
The Stockton Art League at the Goodwin Gallery.
Yeah, at the Goodwin Gallery on weekends, yeah, so there.
So you got involved with Little Manila when they were forming
a preservation group.
Yes.
It was a revolution of the young people who grew up in town, and they saw the destruction that was happening in the historic district, which we now call the Little Manila. Mm-hmm. It is actually anything south of Washington Street, what used to be the Chinatown, Nihomanchi, and the Little Manila area. It was the hub, as far as the Filipinos are concerned, since the 1920s, 1930s. And that was a significant place, but I think what happened was development came in too fast and came in unguarded. So these young folks who saw the need for at least a level of historic preservation. As Joy, you would know also, you fought for the historic preservation of some of those buildings. So we formed a group. We were a child first of the Filipino American National Historical Society. And then we launched a separate battle. It started with a battle with the city council, and it went on at the national level for the historic preservation of buildings that in the United States of America that have meaning to the people who've lived there. Yes. And that's the importance of preservation. And Professor Don Mabalon provided the history aspect of it. Dylan Delvo, both of whom are children of the elderly who've been here for a long time in Stockton. Dylan Delvo is the spokesperson for all of that. And then out came a whole lot of young people who appreciated the history of the Filipinos in Stockton, and we all rallied together for a number of issues that we wanted the city to address and to value this particular ethnic group that has a long ties with the city and the county, to be exact. Yeah.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking to me when I did that picture of Dawn when she was seeing the destruction of the Lafayette lunch counter.
Yes.
And that
previously owned by her grandfather.
Her grandfather. And just to see her heartbreak, I thought no one should have to go through that. And so that really inspired me to get involved with preservation. And so they were able to save 3 buildings, the Mariposa,
yes.
The Rizal Social Club, and the Emerald Restaurant.
Emerald Restaurant, what became Emerald Restaurant.
Right.
Those were the last vestiges of living spaces for the Filipino community that dates far back. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I remember I was at the dedication. I'm not sure what year that was, of all the banners. And
yes.
They had the street blocked off. And so there was a lovely dedication. And
the 4 historic blocks.
The 4
yes.
historic blocks. And right after that, that was when Mayor Podesto was mayor. And I heard him say, if it wasn't for that dedication, those banners, that those buildings, that the Mariposa would have been destroyed, demolished.
Yes, that's right.
So,
that's right.
You know, even then, you know, I think that is one of Stockton's greatest battles is preserving our history. And this is continuing to this day. Buildings are getting knocked down right and left, and it has to stop. It just has to stop.
Yes. Between you and I and a horde of other people out there, Joy, you know, this is a constant battle. The city council membership may change, but the philosophy has to be, and the awareness has to be out there, constantly talked about on how important these ethnic groups were. And they are building their spaces. We now have the temple for the Cambodian community. There are many other temples that are being built out there. This means a lot to them. Our politicians and powers that be really just do not understand. They think it's just another edifice out there. But when people's lives and aspirations are tied to a public space that they create for themselves, I think our politicians should understand that part.
Sure.
They don't have traditions maybe, but we do.
Right.
All of us from the ethnic community.
And
we create our tradition here.
And I think even beyond the ethnic community, I see, you know, the careless treatment of Hunter's Square.
Yes.
Hunter's Square, Charles Weber had set that aside as, you know, a place for the whole community to be able to come and be. And now we have a building in that, you know, the city gave that property to the state to build a new courthouse. And now we have a building. We're losing all our public spaces.
That's right.
And that affects everyone, you know. All cultures, you know, we're losing all of our history, and the way they treated Mel Corin, his family. They had a furniture business, and you know, one business was knocked down after another was knocked down. That actually leads me into his family did something really amazing during when they had the internment for Japanese. His family had a furniture store, and it was M. Corn and Sons. And so when the Japanese, they found out, they were going to have to go to an internment camp, they took their belongings, a lot of them, and went over to the furniture store and asked if they could store those belongings at that location. And they were able to store some of their things there to be able to come back and retrieve later on.
Right,
so
right.
that was a generous thing that he did.
Yes, there were a lot of friendships that went to work during that time, and there's no end to the stories that are being told out there on how a family saved their belongings, not the ones that will be destroyed by age, but the ones that really mean a lot for them. And just imagine being told to abandon all that you have built for years,
right.
and you're told to go to a place. Those were dark years, and the more we recall that, the more we understand the climate that we are in, a climate of oppression and attrition of the weak or the poor, the push out that's happening in our society. But there's a lot even in our local history that we can look back to. And fortunately, all the years that I have been with Sister City, I've listened to all these personal stories on how families survived after the internment camp. And so what means a lot to them means a lot to me too, because I too is an immigrant in this town. So yes, I appreciate those stories. You can picture it in your mind, and they even now make movies out of them, don't they?
Yes, they do. So why don't we talk about the Ito sisters?
Yes,
This was an amazing film they were able to show at Delta College, and just the whole theater was packed. It was in the Tilly Lewis Theater, and
Yes.
you stood up at the end and said that there were a number of points that you wanted to talk about. So
Yes.
why don't you tell us?
My soul was lifted while I was watching the movie. I was surrounded by Japanese Americans, and they were chatting away, and I was in tears. I said, wait, I'm not Japanese American. What's happening to me here?
There we go.
And then one of them tapped my knee, and I said, this movie means a lot to me. But first of all, this is the annual commemoration of the JACL, the Japanese American League, and they do this actually as a gift to their next generation. You see the participation of young people in organizing an event like this. So this is a sacred event for the Japanese American community, not just here, but in other places.
So that's the Day of Remembrance.
A day of remembrance of their history, everything that needs to be remembered. But the Ito sisters hit me hard because, number one, I was just in a reading for Sisters Matsumoto, which is a local family, Japanese-American family, likewise sent to the internment camp. And they were running business here where they had a hotel, if I remember right. I tried to research what else the family owned. And they had, they were in what is Little Manila now, what was Nihomanchi. And again, they were sent to the internment camp. And the play puts them back when they were rebuilding their lives. The Ito sister has a much broader layout of what it was like to be sent to an internment camp. And much later in the discussion, I found out that those pictures were found. Without those important pictures, there would not have been there would not have been visual on what the experience was like in the internment camp. So when I spoke, as emotional as I was, I said, I just about counted 10 points in this movie that struck me, but it was not the time for me to name all the 10 points, but I'm glad you followed up on it. Hey, Elena, what are those 10 points? Number one is because it's an independent lens of a movie, which means that it is as pure as can be. We always trust an independent film because it comes from creators, art creators who have a passion for a subject matter, and they just must make a movie out of it. So to me, independent films are what we should be chasing. When young Safon was starting the International Film Festival here in Stockton, I said, hey, you better have 50% movies and you better have 50% independent film, because they're the soul of whichever country they come from. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones that are out there that never get shown in public theater. But there's so much to be learned. It's like reading a book that was handed down to you from another country. That's the first importance of Ito Sisters as a movie. And by the way, there's a website, itosisters.com.
itosisters.com, ITO sisters.com.
Yes, for people who are listening and are wanting to, what is she talking about? Number two, I saw right away, there are 3 sisters. I saw right away, and by the way, the mom too. So I saw the aspect of rebuilding lives in the hands of the women. The men in the family Ito, they ran the farm, they're the breadwinner. They did all the business aspect of it. But the caring and the nurturing and the rebuilding of life after experience of an internment camp, why would it always fall on women? And then it reminded me that in the early 80s, when I was already here and as I was working in refugee programs, I saw the women, Cambodian, Vietnamese, Laotians, and Hmong, these women who saw the war, but they may have not been participants of the war. They're also the same people who began to reconstruct their lives here in America. And they were the first one to look for resources. Like the Hmong women would be looking for land where they can plant, right? So it's part of the restructuring that they needed to do. Women in the Ito Sisters got repeated in the 80s with the experience of refugee women who were here in Joaquin County.
I just wanted to say that I was really struck by the father's role, mm-hmm. That he came to America, to San Francisco, and he started a jewelry store there in San Francisco right before the 1906 earthquake.
The earthquake.
So he lost everything there, so he had to rebuild his life then. Mm-hmm. Then they went through the Depression. Mm-hmm. They had to rebuild their life then. Yes. Then they go to the internment camp, and then they had to come back. So they rebuilt their life
many times over.
About 4 times.
Right, so, yes. So. And then, of course, when when the movie is told, the storyline in the movie already had the women and the wife, but it looks back, like you said, it looks mm-hmm. back at all those dark days of their lives, which is, again, your immigrant life. Mm-hmm. You could be talking about a Chinese American or the first generation of Chinese who have come to San Francisco, went through the experience of an earthquake, going back and rebuilding their businesses and things like that. And then what the movie captured, of course, it's scripted by a descendant, and she's a woman too, and it was her mother who actually got her in the interest of understanding the family history. So yes, it slants towards the women's history, but I agree, we must never forget what everybody goes through. Sure. In the broader discussion of an immigrant history. It is the men and the women and the children and the next generation who had to carry on in spite of difficulties and outrageous conditions of depression, and including the racism that everybody is faced up to. It's a genderless thing. This whole thing of racism.
There were 2 points too that really they really touched me. Was when the family had saved all this money, they were going to go back to Japan, mm-hmm. and then they had there was a fire, mm-hmm. and they helped, like all the other workers that were there, gave mm-hmm. them all their money.
Yes.
So, so they weren't able to go back. And then right before the internment, the father, he had it was planting time, and he went out in the field and planted the tomatoes before they went off to internment.
That's right.
Oh my God.
It was very symbolic. Yes, that to me was also a very critical point in life. If a father says to himself, I'm going to be resilient in this. And the forethought on his part was, I'm going to plant tomatoes come what may, right? He wasn't thinking about big business, like a tomato distribution center. He was thinking about survival. Everything that he did was symbolic of his own resilience. And again, let's go back to how stories are being told. And for those who intuitively, like immigrants like us, who intuitively see a kind of parallel to how maybe the first Filipinos made a living out of planting in their own backyard. It's the same thing. It's just that spirit of resilience that I think you develop, if you don't already have it in your DNA, when you are challenged in a situation. Sure. And so, yes, I actually clapped at that time. He planted tomatoes. What an amazing chapter in his life. And then the daughters are looking back at it and say, my dad is a hero. He planted tomatoes before we were all scooped up for the internment camp. And the other part about that is, of course, the whole politics of the times. And the father would have been affected by the politics of the time. He had to understand what was going on so he could explain it to his wife and to his children. But it was a muted kind of politics. It was order from the government. It was all signage that probably 99% of the Japanese American did not really understand. But the government posted all kinds of signage all over the place. And now they're just relics of what it used to be. And each time I see it reproduced at the Japanese American Museum in Los Angeles, I said, I wonder if they even understood what this signage said to them. Maybe it was interpreted for them. But if I put myself in the character of people who lived during those times, those mean nothing to me. It was a game of survival at that time, and especially for the young folks, from newborn to toddlers to school-aged children, just being set aside in the camp. And this means a lot to me too, because I was also with the American Friends Society here in town, AFSC. Actually, this is the Quaker group that worked for the education of the young folks in the internment camps. And I was affiliated with them here in town, which brings me also why it's significant for me to be in this radio station where Peace and Justice Network used to be. Everything ties to affiliation with the late John Moriarty, and the work that we did with the Quaker group that I was affiliated with when we were actually doing peace work in every possible aspect of it. John was doing his part for, rest in peace, John. He was doing his part for the community. And the Quaker group, American Friends Service Committee, history records them as the only group that worked with the internment, in the internment camps to take care, to school the young people during those times. And when I saw the whole situation in the camp, on the pictures that they saved just by sheer accident that they found just by visiting the place, as that it was meant to be found so that this storyline could have the visual of what used to be. And that's one of the other aspect of the Ito Sisters movie that I want to bring out. And if people have an opportunity to see the movie or for the public broadcasting to pick it up, these are the things that we look at as immigrants, but these are the things that now resonate more than ever in this climate that we are in, in a political way. Maybe we cannot talk a lot about politics in this radio show, but I just want to say that the impact of a movie, an independent movie, to me, likewise for a theater full of Japanese American, will continue to reverberate among family discussion and for those young people who were there, during the showing of the movie at the San Joaquin Delta College. And the two other points that I want to bring up is the importance of the storytelling and family history that families should pay attention to this early on. We at the Filipino American National Historical Society are encouraging oral history, are encouraging, you don't need to be an author. What about if people just write and not be writers? Just write your family history. Just be able to collect the family photos that tell of your family life. That would be, little did we know, important to the next generation when you can show what it was for you and how things kind of progressed on for your family. That would be a celebration of success, a celebration of love for your family, a celebration of the togetherness as a family and how you supported each other, more so than a celebration of life when the elderly passes. Make meaning of the celebration of life if you're doing it ahead of time and not at the end of time.
You know what I think, a lot of people, they're a little reluctant to write, but you could also be recorded. And when the Ito sisters, the daughter of one of the sisters ended up started recording, I think it was birthday greetings.
Yes.
So, and it's so nice to hear the people in their own voice. Mm-hmm. You know, I would give anything to hear, my father's voice, my aunt's voice. So just to hear the stories as they would tell them, as they would talk.
Mm-hmm. And it inspired the making of the movie. Again, we look at the early idea, the germane idea of what moved the third generation or the fourth generation to say, I'm going to make a movie out of this. Mm-hmm. And movie making is not even her background. She said her background is theater. Mm-hmm. But she is in a circle of people that can make a difference. All those hands around her were just the perfect mix of people who say, let's make a movie of the life of my grandparents. And so it was. So
why don't you talk about the illustration a little bit? Those were just beautiful little poignant pieces.
I noticed it right away early in the film. Again, for lack of source material, they actually recreated out of photographs how the family members would look like, and they added this aspect of the young man. I forget his name. Blank out. It's on the website, folks. Oh my gosh, she's Filipino.
The illustrator. The illustrator
yes.
On the Ito sisters.
Yes. What it is actually, to me, the best approach to recreating family history. And he's got the best idea that I have seen now being used for independent film, is you take old photographs and you sketch or you recreate the faces of the family members, and on those parts of the story that you're telling, you're actually using the illustration and a bit of animation to bring life to that part of family history that is a gap. So you have old pictures, but there's that point in history when they were in the camp, for example, nobody took pictures. There were no photographers. It was a dark part of history, but it comes to life thanks to the technology and the artistic aspect of sketch, and animation. then the story is whole at that point. It's as if you became familiar with everything that happened to them, even the ones that were filled by the animation part. So that's a terrific piece of art that was part of the film that I also valued. And I said, this is how you tell your story. No excuses. We don't know how things were. Nobody took pictures during that time. Or no, you can recreate it from the oral history that you have and from a VHS old film handheld camera of the, it seems like it's a long era already. That was just a few years back. And you recreate the entire story, and you have a full piece of history that are told from one family, by one family to the other family. It's affirming for the other Japanese American family. And I wish every ethnic group would have this kind of experience of seeing family history come to life. Small screen, big screen, websites or YouTube.
Well, the Ito sisters, if you go on the website, they're going to be having a few more screenings at different places. They have the calendar, and you can request a screening. Mel Lagaska from the FAHNS Museum in Stockton mentioned that he would like to have a screening at the museum. So
yes.
Maybe we could bring this to Stockton again. They're open to doing that. And they also were going to be talking to KVIE and, maybe showing it on public broadcasting.
Right.
So.
It becomes a property of PBS, but it is what it should be to be made available in public. So yes, there was this idea that we, Filipino Americans, can bring in a story of the Japanese American experience and parallel some of the experiences that have happened. In a way, there's a universal storyline that comes out of a movie like this. And this is why we all show up for events, because we see our parallel in history. We also see how we can share those experiences and teach each other how we can tell our story and continue to make it resonate in this country.
Yeah, one thing I wasn't expecting from the film, but just it kind of was a history lesson through all the years, all the different anti-Japanese laws.
Yes.
And this was going back, into the 1900s and just all along. And I just couldn't believe all the things and the prominent people that were saying such ridiculous, hateful, leaders that had these notions and were bringing them into law.
Yes, at that time.
And, that's kind of parallels what's happening today. So,
Right.
we could learn a lot from that.
And just a weekend ago at the Filipino American National Historical Society Museum, we had Professor Richard Tanasa talking about the Filipino-American War, a matter that was taken away from history books or never put in history books. And this was the resistance of the Filipinos to American colonial, occupation of the Philippines. And there are pictures and there are books that came out anyhow, but much later, it wasn't till years down the road that scholastic papers came out based on history that were hidden in the archives of the U.S. military. There were pictures taken, but it's for them to put away. It's for Filipino Americans to bring it out and tell the story from those who lived during those times. This is not World War II. This is pre-World War II. And there was this strong resistance against a colonial power, an imperialist power that have come to the country following the Treaty of Paris. As a Filipino community, it's a Filipino-American war that happened in between us being colonized by the Spaniards for 400 years and then us fighting World War II, again, fighting another country. So it's a huge piece of our history that I'm so glad we were able to bring to the museum. And by the way, we will have a speaker series at the Filipino American Historical Society Museum, one of which is Joy, talking about...
I'm the next speaker.
You're the next speaker in the month of April.
April 15th.
And it's April 15 on Weber, 337 East Weber in Stockton. And we welcome these things now that we have drawn audience for many, many subject areas that we can talk about that are timely or have been hidden in history or are aspirational in terms of valuing an artist who lived in Stockton, Greg Custodio.
Yes.
So thank you, Joy, also for, pushing that part of our history when we honor an artist who once lived here in Stockton.
Yes, Greg Custodio, his wife, Lita Custodio, she's going to be at the museum talking about his art. And as far as I'm aware now, there is one remaining mural that is outdoors, an outdoor mural. It's on the back of the Fair Hotel.
Yeah.
In the last year, 2 of Greg Custodio's murals were painted over, unfortunately. And I'm going to be talking about the importance of respecting the history of art. It's not just Greg Custodio. I also, we need to respect all the different people that have contributed. One of the best, most recognized muralists in Stockton is James Bell, and he has actually one of his murals on the Miracle Mile, and that's the only one that I know of that is in a public space. The other of his murals are at the fairgrounds inside of some of the buildings and the Breadfruit Tree restaurant. But, Stockton has a lot to do, a long way to go to be up to rival other cities in their preservation efforts. We really need to honor all the people who have contributed to Stockton, all the cultures. We've all brought something, and each of our voices need to be heard. All
Correct.
The stories, all the untold stories. I heard something about Susan B. Anthony, that I need to investigate that some more. But
Yeah.
she had remarked, that she didn't want to fight for the black women's vote, and I just don't understand that. So there's a lot of, things that we need to investigate, come up with the truth, and, forgive people their past mistakes. Susan B. Anthony, despite that unfortunate comment, she did a lot of good. And we all can, be resilient and turn our lives around in that way. So.
Right. I want to tell you, Joy, that at my day job at WorkNet on 56 South Lincoln Street across DMV, we do have the works of James Bell
Yes,
displayed
yes, I forgot about that.
in our lobby. The reason for this was we've honored him a long time, and we're a public agency. We've honored him in the past. He did we had a theater arts project that had young people doing a musical, and they did everything from the band constructing the set, to acting, singing, and playing the musical instruments. It was a terrific project that we had under a federal program for jobs training for young people. And James Bell was always involved in that through the years, and he would do the sets.
That was at the fairgrounds?
We went from one public park to another.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
wow.
So we have the history of all the paintings that James Bell had done.
Well,
And we
I should be
saved
talking
some
to you
of them.
about that.
Yes, you're welcome to visit. So I guess our time is almost up.
Yeah.
And, Don't Get Me Started, Elena, is in front of you. I just want to say that, for everything that we talked about today, the Ito Sisters, one of the greater films that I have seen in the season of Oscars. It turned out to be a local community showing of the Ito Sisters is my winner. We talked about valuing and respecting history.
Yes.
And you were involved in historic preservation, just as we were in Little Manila Foundation. But there's a lot of elements within that respecting history that each one can pick up and do something about. Each time I talk to families, I tell them, save your family pictures.
Yes.
Nowadays, you take pictures with your cell phone, and it goes nowhere. You either remove it because you've had too many pictures, and then you forget that in the middle of that picture was your 95 years old grandpa blowing his candle, and then he died a day or two after. It's in that cell phone. We don't do hard copies of pictures anymore.
We
have to preserve them.
Put them on CDs,
Yes.
print them, get them out there.
I am so afraid that we're neglecting family history by using the cell phone, and we're not printing our pictures anymore. Mm-hmm. Number two, if you do CD, you better label them.
Yeah, yes. Yes.
And then the importance of art preservation. It's not just the buildings that were significant to our local history. It's the preservation of the artwork,
yes.
because that's the expression of our times. And that's this unknown man named Greg Custodio that was a muralist by virtue of the work that he did back in the days. And thank goodness the Catholic Archdiocese recorded it in their annual books. He turns out to be just a regular artist. And this is what you encourage to be shown at the Mexican Heritage
yes.
Place, the display. And now we're going to talk about it at the museum. That's art in so many forms. We didn't know much about Greg Custodio. We only knew him as a muralist. And here he is.
Oh,
he
yes.
really was a full-fledged artist.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, of course, the family story. We do want to do this family story, regardless of what ethnic group you are. We want to encourage this in the museum, the Filipino Museum, where we can teach. We've actually been teaching oral history, and now we can teach about writing your own bio and your own family history in a very simple but structured way. And you can look back to it. It may not happen in your generation, but leave it. It's a living will that you can leave to your descendants and say, this is a piece of my history. Can you continue it when I'm gone?
So are there going to be classes at the museum?
We're hoping to schedule. We're doing the speaker series first.
Okay.
But there's always been this effort that we should be able to teach writing family history.
I just had a light bulb moment, a brainstorm.
Yes.
It's really wonderful when groups can collaborate. We have the Right Place in downtown, and that's a writing center, and they're trying to teach writing. Maybe, Paula Scheel,
Yes.
maybe we could combine that writing effort. Various people could go to the Right Place and learn this, and could help the museum. You guys,
we're not too far from each other either.
could collaborate.
Right.
You're only 2 blocks, or actually a block away.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So, before we go, could you just mention your work with the Sister Cities?
My sister city. I've been with the sister city for a good number of years, and of course we have 7 sister cities now. And I started out because I'm with the second sister city, Iloilo. But let me just name all the sister cities of Stockton, and of course we're open for memberships. And it's all about goodwill relations with the countries that began during the Eisenhower years, when he encouraged kind of people-to-people affiliations. And this again was part of the reconstruction of the spirit of the war that just happened when countries don't get along. But the effort that happened beginning in 1956 under the Eisenhower presidency is to create these affiliations of one city in the USA to another city in another country. It could be Europe, it could be Asia. So Stockton has had, in the last 60 years, 7 sister cities. The first one was in Japan, Shimizu, Japan, which is now Shizuoka. And then, which is, by the way, a 60-year relationship already, a lot of student exchange. The second one was Iloilo in the Philippines, another port city. The first things that got it started is because they're all port cities, so they have a lot of similarities. It's a very diverse kind of setting when you have a port city, and Stockton is, as we know, port city. And then the third one was Mexico, Empalme in Mexico, and we still do exchange with them, followed by China, Foshan, China. They were here. We did a lot of trade, and then followed by Parma, Italy. We still a lot of goodwill exchanges. One of them is a culinary connection with the Joaquin Delta College, and then we have Battambang, Cambodia, our 6th sister city, and we did visits in Battambang. Battambang was where the camps were for the refugees before they came to San Joaquin Valley or they came to America. And then the 7th one, of course, is in Nigeria. We have now 2 Asian countries, 1 Mexican, I'm sorry, 3 Asian countries, 1 Mexican, and then Asaba, Nigeria is our first African-American country. There are, I think there have been 30 countries wanting to have a sisterhood with Stockton, and they have to promote themselves first, and there's got to be a significant number of population here who can help with the early work of a sister city. And the one that's singing the tune right now is, then I forget, another African country. But you're welcome to come and join Sister City. Application is on the city website. And more importantly, join some of our activities, because it is really a kind of a community, to a larger extent, a nation-building effort that is sustained under Sister City International.
So what do you guys do? You have fundraisers. You said
we do.
There's exchanges of
yes. Every sister city has its a fundraiser. It's Zanzibar that's wanting to be the next sister city. So they're bringing in their folks to do a presentation to the Sister City Board. And Zanzibar has many ties with the East Indian community, unbeknownst to many, because the East Indians came as import workers in Africa 3 generations ago. So there's a lot of ties with East Indian. And fundraiser is an important part of any organization. And the reason why we do fundraiser is so we can afford to bring in guests and allow them to tour and get to know Stockton all the way up to the Yosemite or San Francisco area. And for a group of us going to our sister city countries also. And we don't sponsor people's fare or airfare, but we save money so that we can offer gifts for each other. And that's what the fundraiser is for.
How often do people from Stockton take trips over to the sister cities? Is that every year? Or?
There is a trip coming up to Parma, Italy in April, in the month of April. There's a trip coming up in the fall to, I believe, in China. And a few other things are in the works. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a trip to Mexico also. Sometimes it's the group Stockton to go out there, or it's them coming in and doing visits here. Again, it has always worked. The friendship of different countries can be strengthened at a grassroots level, which is that of a sister city goodwill relations.
Good. Very good. Well, I'd like to thank you for your time, all your insights.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed talking.
And
stop me now.
There's so much more you still have to say, but maybe you could come back some other time and talk a little bit more about that project with James Bell and
yes.
anything else that you would like to discuss. I really appreciate everything that you do for Stockton, and I'm so glad that you've come here.
Well, we want to rock this station. It's doing its part, right?
Oh,
in building this community. So, KXVS, we're here.
KXVS.
Bring it on.
And we'll see you next time on Behind the Art Scene. KXVS, the voice of Stockton.
Thank you, Joy. Appreciate it.